without further ado, I would like to ask my panelists coming up on stage that I'm not so alone. Philippe, yeah, please. And there's just one remark in housekeeping, and that is we would like to open this discussion very quickly. This is not a discussion in front of you, this is a discussion with you, and I appreciate very much your engagement and your activism within that conference up to this point. So I'm happy to give you the floor. So, who is with me? Friederike Köhler-Geib. You work with World Bank. We got to know you as a chief economist in KfW, we, the Frankfurt people, and now you're the member of the executive board of the Bundesbank. We are very happy to have you. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Merci d'être là, Patrick Montagner. We have a huge track record in the world of supervision, banking supervision. You work with Banque de France, you work with the Autorité de contrôle prudentiel et de résolution, which is, in my eyes, the banking supervisor of France. And you are here in your capacity of member of supervisory board of the ECB. So you are one of this SSM that we know in Frankfurt. Thank you for coming. Bienvenue, Patrick Montagner.
Danke.
Yeah, and this is a little bit unfair because you have introduced yourself already, Philippe.
Don't worry.
It's not possible to welcome the host. So thank you very much. Everybody knows you. You have made your point that since the 80s you are in that business, but we appreciate very much to have you in this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So we had this wonderful and very fruitful journey through the 19th century, the 20th century, the crisis, 2008. Now we are coming back home to here and now. And I would like to ask you the question that was within all the keynotes until now, which is about the similarities and the distinctions of the two systems, which are still seen in a national way, the French and the German system. So in your opinion, what are the major differences between the French and the German banking system, or let's say the financial cultures behind that system? And Friederike Köhler-Geib, if you would like to start, and the others would like to add.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's really a great pleasure and honor to be here. Je suis convaincue de l'importance d'un fort lien entre la France et l'Allemagne. That comes maybe also because I went to school to Montpellier when I was a pupil, and then I went to HEC as an exchange student. And when thinking about our conversation today, I thought back whether I opened a bank account in France while going to study there and what that would say about financial integration at the time. Well, I stayed with my bank account, and it was a Swiss one, because longer term I was studying at Switzerland at the time. When thinking about the banking systems, I'd like to start out with a similarity, because both banking systems, or both financing the structures in Germany and France, have bank loans as the most important external debt financing instrument. When we think of differences, though, and we've seen that, I found that very interesting already coming from a long history, the German banking system is much more decentralized with presence of regional and cooperative banks, while the French system is much more centralized, and the mere numbers illustrate that. There are 1,335 credit institutions in Germany compared to 339 in France. But from a central banker's perspective, the structure of interest rate fixation is even more relevant. Because when it comes to adjustable versus fixed rates as one dimension, there is research that shows that adjustable interest rates might be more sensitive to short-term money market rates, and hence amplify monetary policy transmission, as a paper of my colleague from the Bundesbank Research Center, Teti Tsatsumani, shows. Another dimension is maturity. And there is a study from the ECB from last year looking at the period from 2022 to 2023, and you can see that 6-month fixed rate loans may have a stronger sensitivity to monetary policy rates than 12-month adjustable loans may have. And when we then look at France and Germany, they tend to be relatively similar in that respect, as the paper shows as well, because in Germany, newly issued debt in that time, loans, were 62% fixed rate loans, as opposed to 55% in France. And at the same time, the maturity of the newly issued loans in France was double as long as the one in Germany, 7 years compared to 3.5 years. And what we see is that the difference in those maturities and the impact on the response to monetary policy rates was, there was a difference, but it was not statistically different. So to summarize, I would say from a central banker's perspective, it's really important to understand those differences in the banking systems, because this matters for monetary policy transmission.
And you see, it's good to have a central banker with us, because that's your first view is already on the banking system, is how efficient can monetary policy be because of the structure of the credits that dominates. So we see some, as you said, some similarities, but we see some differences when it comes to decentralizing and a centralized system, which is not very surprising from the German point of view with all the Sparkassen and Genobanken. Thank you very much for this first impulse. And Patrick Montagner, your first view about similarities, distinctions, what would you say?
First of all, I would like to thank the organization for the motto, "History Matters." That's a wonderful motto. So, and you know, I'm on stage today because in '86 I have decided to apply for the Banque de France, just because I was fascinated by the history of the banking sector and by the financial crisis. And I can tell you that at the beginning of the '80s, trying to find articles by historians about the banking sector, the banking crisis, in the university libraries was just a nightmare. So now it's very easy through internet. So I'm just here because a professor told me, you are so interested in that you should try to work for the central bank. And more than quite 40 years after, I'm still completely amazed by the job I'm doing. So I'm more a supervisor than a central banker, to be frank, even if I have spent my whole career in 2 central banks, mainly in France, and now for 5 years I have a mandate at the ECB. So as supervisor at the ECB, maybe it's another point of view. We supervise both banking system in the same way, because we have the same rules and the same kind of effectively concrete supervision. But after that, I must add that we take into consideration the business model, and then we can see the differences. Because, for instance, we have 27 significant institutions in Germany, supervised by the ECB. We have only 11 in France. What does it mean? It means that with the 11 SI in France, we supervise 86% of the total of banking assets, of the French banking assets. With the 27 German SI, a little bit less than 60% of the German banking assets. That's another way to say the same thing than you, effectively, that the decentralized approach. And so the other thing is that we are supervising 7 GSIB, you know, the global systemic international banks, which are determined by the FSB in Basel. And among the 7, 4 are French. One is German, without any surprise, it's Deutsche Bank, but the others are French. So that's also another way to measure this concentration of the system in France. And the other difficulties also is, everybody is saying we have also a strong roots in both countries about mutual banks and cooperative banks. That's true. I was in Warsaw last week, or 10 days ago, I don't remember exactly. I was in the panel with just people from BVR, Daniel Clinton, another one from BPC, the French cooperative group. We are not talking about the same cooperative groups, not at all. Two of the cooperative banking group in France are GCIB. That's not the case. And they have a strong also international presence. That's also a major difference. And the way they are organized is also completely different. And the big difference between the IPS in Germany and what we call the central bodies in France is completely different. Yeah. So at the end, as ECB, we must recognize and we also acknowledge that when supervising all these groups, we take some different approach because it's not at all the same business model, the same way the group are organized, and also it's not the same risk appetite.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just a short follow-up because I didn't get your calculation. You said 7, and that means 1 Deutsche Bank and 6 French banks, 4 private?
4 are GCIB. Yeah. Among the 7 GCIB, yeah. 4 are French. 1 is German, another one is probably Spanish, the Dutch, ING.
ING, yeah, okay. Good. Okay, thank you. And we have learned that after 40 years you are still happy in your job. This is very rare, so you have learned already one thing in this panel. Philippe Baudot, just your view on this distinction, maybe from a more practical side, because you experience the world of banking in the most countries every day, more or less.
I'm going to give you a very concrete and practical example. We were together, we have a business executive committee on Wednesday, and then I was asking our colleagues in France, what do you right now propose to our clients, private clients? And then asking the same question to the Germans. And our French colleagues told me, Philippe, we are proposing life insurance contracts because there is guarantee, 5%, 4%, and so on. That's where, and then the German colleagues were saying, oh, we're thinking about the Swiss franc, blah, 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 blah. So it was very interesting. We are the same group. We have the same products. We have the same process. At the end, the French are proposing the life insurance contracts because it's part of the saving system, and it's definitely one of the big difference between the French and the German system, where the life insurance plays absolutely a huge role in France compared to Germany, as a small example. And if I may add to what you just said, we speak very often in Germany about mid-sized banks, small banks, and big banks in France. But the mid-sized banks in Germany are part of the same family, 2 families. Yes. So are they one bank or small banks? I may ask the question. And then if you take into account the consolidated point of view, the saving banks in Germany, it presents 180 billion equity, which is by far the biggest banking system in Europe. So is it a small bank or a big bank? At least it's a big family and a very important family in Germany. And we could say the same thing with a Bank Populaire, Volksbanken. They have something like, I think, something 110 billion equity, which is the number 2, in fact, banking system in Europe. So, yes, it is many small banks at the same time, and they decide themselves and they make their own decisions, but part of the same family with the same kind of business model. I think that's maybe something we have to have in mind. It is smaller banks at the same time that they are by far the biggest banks in Europe.
Well, we have the target to come up to a little bit the idea of what could happen to deepen the internal market in Europe and the capital market and the savings and investment market in Europe. But before that, let's have another last question on the distinction and the national fragmentation. Using the opportunity to have you, Philippe Baudot, in this debate, we see that it's not so easy to have cross-border mergers in Europe. We experience that at the moment in the case of an Italian-German example. But as well, we have not experienced too much of cross-border. You're one of these exceptions. So is it still very difficult to have, is it still a fragmented market if it comes to mergers and acquisitions for banks or financial services, or has that changed a little bit in the last years?
My view on the consolidation of the banking system on a European point of view is very clear. I don't know, there's a question mark, if a big German bank, I'm not going to give any names, okay, is merging with a French bank tomorrow. Which bank? I don't care. Is it going to bring a lot of value added to the shareholders, to the people who are working in the firm, and to the clients? Question mark. What I see, I'm talking very often of Siemens Zero of the banking system. What I'm saying is, within a bank, you have many, many different expertise, many different kind of jobs. And that's part of the consolidation we could see in Europe. On our side, we have made a consolidation of brokering, equity brokerage, because we have taken the broker of Commerzbank, of Natixis, of ABN AMRO, BBVA and Raiffeisen, and we're going to go on. Okay, that's a consolidation. You have seen many consolidation on the asset management, on the custody, and I think it's a beginning of the process. What would be good for the banking system is taking into account the magnitude of investment of IT. I think we can scale what we can do on IT security, innovation, if we scale the expertise within banking systems. So what I would say and what I would see, maybe more consolidations, not necessarily big mergers, but more cooperation, merger of deals and making deals on many topics that we could imagine, on the wealth management, on the asset management, on the custody, but many others we could imagine. And that's, I think, for me, the best answer to the consolidation of the banking system in Europe.
You're totally right. I had the pleasure to be the moderator on a custody conference, and there is a huge dynamism in even cross-border mergers, because there is the big players are French players, German players, Luxembourg players, and they fit very well together. But on the issue of fragmentation, before we come to the European issues and the capital markets, is there a view from your side as well on how much we have fragmentation still, and is there any progress in bringing this internal market closer together?
From the ECB perspective, effectively, we have seen some progress in the consolidation, but domestic consolidation each time. And even sometimes when you say that you have cross-border acquisition or potential acquisition, sometimes it could be more a domestic question than a cross-border one. Because you told about another group, European group, they have a brand and a subsidiary already in Germany. But so that's very important. From time to time, we need to think that we are European. So for the ECB, we don't care about who is buying who. We just need to have solid business model. We don't see that for the moment, that retail market, because when people are talking about consolidation, they always think to retail market, to the branch that you see in the streets. That's a very difficult market because you have a lot of national habits, national rules, notably the consumer protection and things like that, which are very difficult. So to penetrate a new market is very, very difficult. So at the end, the synergy that you can have by merging, for instance, a French bank and the German retail bank is not so easy, because you have so many differences between the two systems that the synergies you can have is probably not so important. But I agree with you. You have a lot of some other business line where you have a lot of consolidation. Effectively, we have seen that wealth management is partly your job, if I can say, custody, effectively asset management, and we have also some CIB platform. When you look at, for instance, the role of Deutsche Bank in France and in some other countries, but also BNP and some others in Germany, Santander, UniCredit. on the CIB part.
So CIB, my corporate investment.
Yes, you have some platform where, in fact, the need of the clients, you can have a more harmonization and to have an IT platform which is more harmonized, and the cost of development for that kind of activity is lower, with a huge synergies coming from that kind of investment, more than the retail market. So everybody is completely focused on the retail market, but we need to take into consideration the rest of the business unit in the banking sector.
Thank you.
I would add a perspective from research, because there is a paper by the ECB from last year that shows that since the initiation of the monetary union in 1999, price and also volume-based indicators of financial integration have progressed in a very limited way. So in that sense, I think it's a bit of a broader and a research perspective, but to complement the arguments.
Happy to have you, not just as a central banker, but she's responsible for research in the central bank, and everybody sees that this discussion is research-based because you present so much data. Thank you very much. I promised that I open the discussion quite early. There is already a question in the back. Do we have a microphone over here? Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Edgar Salzmann, and I'd like to ask a question concerning Finanzmärkte, Finanzplätze, so financial centers. And maybe you, Monsieur ODDO, you would like to answer. I've seen that you have signed the paper for Frankfurt, so the 7 points that we want to do to strengthen the financial markets here in Frankfurt, and I'm happy to see your signature there. But I assume that your heart must really blooding, on the one hand Paris, on the one hand Frankfurt. You probably want to strengthen both. So my question is, seriously, what can we here in Frankfurt learn from Paris to strengthen our financial center here in Frankfurt to be even more, let's say, competitive to you to catch up?
Thank you. Mr. Salzmann, we welcome the question, having in mind that we have a whole panel on the issue coming afterwards, so I don't want to cannibalize too much, but I'm eager to hear the answer of Philippe ODDO.
What I invite is, and we're going to have a discussion later on, between Paris and Frankfurt. I think Frankfurt has a huge competitive advantage, and we have to have in mind the number one is the fact that the German state is a AAA. It's a AAA one. So it's a great competitive advantage for a bank to have its headquarters in Germany with a state which is AAA. So it's a huge impact. I had a conversation with an Italian bank, I will not name it, and tell them, hey, you are in Milan, but if you go to Frankfurt, your ranking is going to change a lot. And that's one of the main competitive advantages. But Frankfurt has many competitive advantages. Paris has other competitive advantage. And honestly speaking, on certain point of view, Paris is quite a charming city, which can be more attractive of certain point of view, but not all. But yes, we have to build from the two countries. But what is really important is to increase the capacity of the financial market of Europe. Because that's what is very important. What we have to do is to teach the people all over France, Germany, to have the best schools, the best universities, and at the end, so the main thing is to have the best people, to attract the best people, to keep them, and then to have more money. But I don't know if I want to enter to the topic, invested in equity. That's the number one priority. And I can elaborate that maybe further on, because we don't need to merge the two stock exchange as a user. Great competition, just to keep a competition, because it's good for Europe to have the Frankfurter Börse and Euronext is very good. Don't change that. It will not bring anything. If we can merge more the regulation, maybe, but with an objective for, on one side, protect the investors and the mindset to develop the financial markets, it could be maybe interesting. But that could help the both cities and globally the financial market. I think we have to have in mind today is not Frankfurt, not Paris, but what can we do together to reinforce the financial market of Europe? As a user, I can tell you, we make IPOs on a regular basis. Where do we go to have new money? To London and New York. I'm sorry, not in Frankfurt, or a bit more in Paris. But the pockets are very limited in equity in Frankfurt, which is a catastrophe. But there is such amount of money in Europe, so we have to. But I don't want to deep in detail.
No, perfectly, because
then, my main topic is 30 trillion, 40 trillion savings in Europe. 15% of it is invested in equity. In the US, 45. So 30% of savings in Europe should be invested in equity if you compare to the US. So you have a lot of money. We have such a big opportunity. Is a 10 trillion euros that can be invested in equity. But that's our own responsibility. And on that side, I must say, because I mean, I know the strengths and the weakness of both sides, but the French government have done more things to encourage the investment in equity. And I will take a first example. It's coming from de Gaulle, you know, he has invented a concept of la participation, and a part of the profit of the company is given to the employees in a pocket for the next 5 years. And if they keep the money for the next 5 years, then they don't pay tax. And the employer doesn't pay also social securities. And what do they do? What they do, and we offer the people to buy stocks of the company, and then companies like Bouygues and so on, they have the family on one side, and people work in the group on the other side. So you have a big amount of people work in the companies in France who are shareholders of their company, which is very important. Another thing is le PEA, well, it's not bad. You know, a part of the saving has been invested in European equity, and you can save capital gains taxes and revenue taxes. And then on the innovation, the French government has done incentives to invest in venture, just in order to say, I mean, it's a good timing to talk to our new German chancellor to tell him, hey guy, why don't you try to see if we could imagine some incentives to invest more in equity? And a last example, free shares. I mean, as you know, our colleagues, more than 50% of our colleagues are shareholders of the group, with 25% of the capital. If I give shares, I don't give usually, but because they have to pay, they have to invest. But if they invest, then we are ready to help them and to give some new shares. In France, you pay 10,000 euros, I can give you another 5,000, and they don't pay tax unless they sell the shares a couple of years after. In Germany, if I do the same thing, you invest 10,000, I give you 5. But they have to pay their taxes straight away. But they cannot afford it because they have invested already 10, and then they have to pay an additional tax, which is impossible. So I have less people, unfortunately, in Germany who are invested in our equities than in France. And that's a couple of examples. We could take many examples like that where we should incentivize the European people to invest more in equity.
Thank you, Philippe. Thank you very much for bringing us straight forward to the issue of how to overcome the fragmentation of the capital markets, to deepen the capital markets, to make them more efficient, and especially to encourage citizens to jump into equity and not just in savings. Well, I have been Brussels correspondent for 11 years. I have seen Sir Jonathan Hill 2015 presenting Capital Markets Union concept. Not much has happened until now. Now there is a new dynamism, so maybe there are things changing now, but let's talk about what is key now. We have discussed about tax incentives, we have discussed about single supervisory of market infrastructures. We have discussed about securitization issues. So the catalog is still there. It's part of the working program of the Commission, and it's going on some steps. But what, from your side, is key from the examples that you brought? We have an idea what you would do first if you would be Chancellor. Frau Köhler-Geib, what is key in your view?
Yeah, so I mean, from a central bank perspective, and me being responsible for IT, data and statistic research and risk controlling, I would say, so there is this new report of the EU Commission that was just published in March. And as President Nagel of the Bundesbank has mentioned in previous presentations, talks, from a Bundesbank perspective, certainly those aspects regarding the banking union are very relevant. Then the one on the market infrastructure package, the review of securitization, and then also the strategy on financial literacy. Now it goes back to the point that you made, to have people invest in equity, there needs to be financial literacy. And then, of course, we also actively support the digitalization of the financial sector, and being responsible of IT, certainly we contribute to the introduction of in particular also a wholesale digital euro, which would help as a means of transactions, large transactions between financial institutions, and would also address one of the issues of a pan-European payment system, if you wish. So these are just a couple of points that I would like to add here.
Thank you for that. I'm just looking. I saw somebody with a T-shirt, "Cash is truth," but he's not with us at this moment when we talk about the digital euro. So we see there are in the package of the Savings Investment Union, which is the working program, there are some points that get support by Mr. Nagel and by Bundesbank, and you mentioned that you stressed especially the digital things at the end. Patrick Montagner, is
just to focus myself, because I don't represent the full ECB. The Governing Council has supported heavily the SIU, and in the same term that effectively that all the central bankers, because they are central bankers. Yeah. But for the supervisory perspective, we are still facing a lot of national barriers and ring fencing coming from the 2008 crisis, which have not been dismantled. We have created effectively the SSM, we have created also the SRB, but it's still incomplete. We still have a lack for having a real European deposit guarantee fund, which would be very useful to allow to say to people that they are protected, and not only with the link with the states of each bank. That would be also a huge progress, and also to have something about what it has been called CMDI. Maybe that the proposal is not perfect. Maybe everything can be improved, and that's a question. But the crisis management before resolution, and also to have some liquidity question when talking about resolution, we have a lot of things to improve to have a full efficiency of a real banking union. So for us as a supervisor, we would like to have less national barriers, more EU system, and a banking union completed to have the full landscape very active. And we need to do so before a crisis, because the EU sometimes is reacting only during the crisis or just after. That's the worst recipe. The best idea is to say when it's calm, when the banking system is very strong, very resilient, very well capitalized, we can do that now, not during a crisis, because during a crisis, the confidence is just vanishing. Yeah.
I have a short follow-up on that, but beforehand, just because I'm not sure if everybody is very familiar with all these each. The CMDI is a package where the legislators try to get in even smaller banks, and not just the biggest bank, into resolution schemes, and so open a little bit the resolution to other banks than the real big banks. And there is some progress at the moment. The Parliament has gone 2 steps, which is for these items some interesting steps, because for years Germans have successfully blocked everything. So my follow-up question is: do you see there is some chance, some hope for?
You asked me what will be the priority for the new chancellor. That's a question for him. But to be honest, that's a very. We have a huge similarity between French bankers and the German bankers in this area for completely opposite reasons. They don't want that. But for completely opposite reasons, that's amazing, because they have a different reasoning and coming completely like that, but at the end of the day, they have the same consequence. They don't want. So that's, sometimes we have some huge similarities, even with a very different system.
Yeah. So you have something like a coalition of the unwilling in this respect, but I promised to take your questions. Are there any more questions for the panelists? Okay, then I would come up to another issue, and maybe you join. There is still some time for that. We have talked about the competitiveness of European banks, if we see it on a more global scale, and what needs to be happened that there is more competitiveness. Is that the same agenda as we have discussed? It is the end of, or the overcoming of fragmentation, or is this something different? How we can make European banks more competitive, especially to US or Anglo-Saxon banks? Who would like to start? Patrick?
Yes, I can, yes. Yeah. I have explained recently to the Agence France-Presse that there is sometimes a misunderstanding between competition and competitiveness. Yeah. That's something completely different. Competitiveness of the economy is not the result of the banking regulation. That's not at all that. Competitiveness of the economy is a question of innovation, having a safe innovation, the financing of innovation, and a lot of things like that, a good labor market and things like that. Banking regulation is not the adversary of the competitiveness. That's the contrary. With a good and a safe and resilient banking system, then you will have growth. Without that, we all know that the huge toll paid by the economy to the banking crisis. We have seen some demonstration by you just previously that after crisis, a huge decrease of the offer of credit just because the banks are under stress. So we know that there is a cost for that. After that, of course, we can discuss. Maybe there is some burdensome thing that could be removed. Maybe we can do things differently. Maybe we can simplify a lot of things, because year after year we have accumulated a lot of new things, new processes. Everything can be discussed, but not the bulk of the regulation and the resilience of the system. That's very important for me, because I remember I was already involved in the supervision 20 years ago. I remember when we were facing the wind coming from UK and sometimes also some other European countries, saying we need to have light supervision. We have seen the result of light supervision in 2008, and look at also the decision taken in some huge third country for the regional banks. When you withdraw a lot of rules, at the end of the day, you have a systemic crisis. So be careful. We don't move the regulation for the banking system just because it's trendy. We need to be very careful with that to keep the bulk of the regulation and maybe to simplify a lot of things. Maybe sometimes there is a burdensome thing that we can be discussed, but not the regulation as such.
Philippe, you're one of the rare bankers that I know who is nodding when a regulator or a supervisor talks about the value of regulation. I see a lot of bankers complaining. Maybe that is due to the fact that I always have these discussions in Brussels and they have to be a little bit rebellion there. But what is your stake on that?
So what I would say, thank you, because you make good regulation, in the sense that thank you, so we have a safe system. Thank you because the regulators and the supervisors are visiting us, and then it's another look at what we do. And for me, I'm responsible on my own account. So always what I'm saying, if regulators are coming, it's a gift. At the same time, you are talking about simplification. and it rings quite well the bell. Because just for you to understand, we have double the size of the investment in IT in 3 years, and in fact, the magnitude of investment for regulation is exactly 3 times. So now we are close to 50% of our new investments in IT are related to regulation. That's something really important. We have hopefully a good competitiveness, because most of the people who are developing IT are based in Tunisia. So, and they are doing a great job. But just to have that in mind, the magnitude of the investment related to regulation is very high, and not only through banking system, they are also coming from Europe. Maybe a small point about what is very important is during the past few years, the banking system was traded below book. If you are traded below book, you are not allowed to make a capital increase, because day one, then your shareholders are losing money. So if you want to invest more and to be able to grow your business, you have to have a market cap which is above your book. And then we have seen that the American banks have a big advantage on that point of view. There are many reasons, but one of the reasons is the size of the balance sheet of the banks in Europe compared to the US. I mean, I think you know that much better than I do. I think the balance sheet of the European banks compared to GDP is probably 3 times more than the relationship between the balance sheet of the US bank compared to the GDP. So the balance sheet of the banks is much too big in Europe. And one of the great initiatives we could have is to have a kind of a Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, on many banks, the real estate loans represent close to 30% of the balance sheet. And then if you can help them to refinance those loans through a system like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, you could decrease by 30% the balance sheet. Just as an example. So securitization is a big issue to help the banking sector to have less balance sheet and more savings to do other things, and why not to allow then to incentivize more the savers to invest in other things than the banking deposit.
Thank you very much. It will be very interesting in May or start of June. We will see securitization proposal by the Commission, which is already tabled, and the issue that you made, the incentives and the Freddie Mac issue is still the interesting question mark behind that. How much of a Freddie Mac-minded approach it will be or not? There are the Germans, in this case, a little bit confrontative to the French proposals. So we will see in latest in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, we will see if something like a mind of Freddie Mac will come into European legislation. Friederike Köhler-Geib, is there something you would like to add to this last discussion here?
Yeah, I think maybe just from a perspective of the overall economy, there is research from OECD that just shows that improving financial systems does offer tremendous effects on productivity. So it's a worthwhile endeavor, even though I'm not going to go into details into what the particular measures could be.
Thank you. Okay, so last chance. We take the 2 questions as the final questions. We have, we have 3 questions. We take them all and we make the last final round. We start as the microphone is over there, but we take the 2 questions as well.
Thank you. My name is Markus Konz. I think it's quite interesting that we were speaking about the competition between Paris and Frankfurt. But I think the competition is not Paris-Frankfurt, it's Paris and Frankfurt versus London. And it was very much stressed, the strong regulation we have in Europe, which is the same for Frankfurt and Paris, and the light regulation in London. But what we have just recently again done, we were promoting London by exempting actively as European Commission London from the strong regulation we have in Europe. Why do we do that? Why don't we work together in Europe and fight for our regulation and don't exempt London clearing accounts as a key password for that.
Okay, thank you. So this is for example, for the issue of euro clearing. It's over here, the two. Yeah, there's a microphone coming. There's a microphone, but there are two people. So yes, please.
My name is Michael Klaus. I have a comment and a question. The comment, I would like to pour a little bucket of cold water over the statement that we have such a very stable banking system and such a great state of regulation. If I look at what is happening in the United States, for that matter, and I'm sure the development is rather similar in Europe, we have a banking system that is so much regulated that it cannot act as the main trader for government bond securities because there is too much balance sheet compression to do that. And on the other hand, we have a shadow banking system where the hedge funds will put up trades with 50 times to 100 times leverage. I do not see that as a very stable state of affairs. So that was my comment. The other one is a question. As I'm just in the process of updating my lecture on bankers' pay, I just labored through 38 pages of Q&A for the Institutsvergütungsverordnung issued by the BaFin last fall. It really gives you the spirit there that the authors of those technical standards were trying to cover every single little aspect of life. Do you honestly think that this is the way to go forward? Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. So we discussed a lot of aspects, what to do and where we progress already on the banking and capital markets union, what is still missing. I wonder, due to the strong interconnection between the state and the financial or banking sector more specifically, don't we have first to make more progress on a fiscal union as well? We all know what that means. Maybe a short comment on that. Isn't that necessary? We have seen the experience in the Greek financial crisis, the interconnection between the banking union and the governments and the state and what was necessary. And just to follow on Michael Klaus' remark, we have so many European supervisories. We have the European Central Bank and all kind of supervisory boards. Don't we need a streamlining there on the supervision as well? What is going to happen if I look at all the regulatory on ESG on the German side, on the French side, and the European side? So where's the streamlining on the bureaucracy on a European level?
Okay, so we have three questions to be answered. The one is, why are we so easygoing with London and not more coercive if it comes to euro clearing and other things? Second is, I'm happy that it needed 59 minutes until we came to Institutsvergütungsverordnung, because usually in German debates that earlier. So about the granularity of red tape and bureaucracy. And the third, do we need first a fiscal union and then come to a capital markets union or a savings investment union? Pick the one you would like to. Philippe Bordeaux, if you start with something.
I'm certainly not going to speak about the competition in terms of regulation between London and Europe, because that's not my business. It's probably more yours. But we need people who are coming from, my own culture. This system of fix and bonus is horrible. We have been pushed through the system to have a higher fix and lower bonus. And we are in a business which is very volatile. And when the markets are going up, great. When they are going down, we have to survive. And one of the way to be flexible is a bonus. And if you are not, and if you are within a very rigid system, it's very difficult to manage the volatility of your revenues. So I think it's a big problem for competitiveness of this business, which needs flexibility. Flexibility on many sense, and working law in Germany is very difficult and not competitive compared to the French law. That's French labor law. It's much more flexible in France, and the system of the bonus, the fix, and so on, and the tax system in Germany is really a good potential of improvement.
Okay, so there's some space for Friederike Köhler-Geib. Maybe the fiscal union question, maybe.
I would take a larger perspective, because we're at a point where there are a lot of uncertainties. Now, if you look at any measure of economic policy uncertainty, those are very high at this moment. And when we think about Europe, there are a lot of issues that we can address here that are within control. So one can also interpret this moment as an opportunity to actually address those things that are within control. Now, and when I think about the literature on growth regressions, I would come to organizing it according to a production function where you think about labor. So what can we do to unlock the potential of human capital in Europe? Capital. What can we do to unlock the investment capacity that we have in Europe? And then third one, innovation. Key for productivity. And this is in a moment where there is so much out of control. One thing that is key and maybe useful to just put in our minds. And I come back to the very start when I said that I went to school in Montpellier. I went to the Lycée Jean Monnet in Montpellier. And Jean Monnet said that Europe is forged in times of crisis and will be the solution or the sum of the solutions to those crises. I'd like to add this thought at this moment.
This is, thank you. And it's good that give us some optimism because we have crisis enough, so maybe Europe is working quite well at the moment. Patrick Montagnier.
Europe is working quite well or not, that's not the question. Europe is there. Of course, we can always improve things. And for the banking regulation, because I don't try to talk about the fiscal way, it's not my job at all. And frankly, I would avoid to do so, to say first the tax and then the rest, because in this case, we won't do anything. Because probably that the tax question is more rooted in the national powers. So I don't see for states being completely able to run on to that. So talking about financial supervision, it would be a little bit simpler first to talk about that and to withdraw some national layers sometimes, and also to sometimes harmonize some vertical layers also, because effectively you have had the SSM, the SRB, you have also some ESMA regulation, sometimes coming into and you also have a lot of vertical things like that, the SG. So it's a little bit complicated at the end when you're receiving everything like that to understand correctly everything. And I don't know what are the 38 pages, but I'm sure that you can find more than 38 pages in some of the regulation. Don't worry about that. We can do more than 38. So. What I have seen and what I have understood from the declaration of the European Commission, it was in March, probably mid-March, that they would try to have a report which was initially planned for 28, if I remember well. It has been advanced to 26, end of 26, and we need now to see how they want to do so, to have this wise person, I don't know who will be in charge of that, report about the banking all regulation for the financial system, how we can try to simplify, to harmonize, also a lot of things. That could be a good way to try to understand, to have a stock take of all these various layers of regulation. Of course, that's it. After that, London versus continental Europe, or even New York or Singapore, that could be the same question. Effectively, London has withdrawn some regulation, notably the bonuses regulation has been completely withdrawn. That could be your for you, Mr. ODDO. But first, once again, I remember the light supervision coming from London in 2000, during the 2000 years until 2006. frankly, it was not the best idea we have had. So be careful with that. Once again, the banking regulation is sometimes producing huge effects on the real economy and the rest of the economy, because banks are part of the real economy. They are not a side. Banks are the real economy. That's why we're supervising them, because it was only hedge fund, something else, they were not supervised. After that, do we need to supervise hedge fund? That's a question that we have now since 2008 without any answer at this stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your engagement on stage. And it's not just Patrick Montagner who's passionate in his job. Thank you very much.
Merci.